Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where I talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Very excited today to have with us Matt Ebert. Matt is the founder and CEO of Crash Champions. He's a well-known entrepreneur in the collision repair industry. That's fun, right? Getting your car crashed. This is the guy to go to. He's going to help fix your things up, but his story is pretty remarkable. He started the company. He's going to talk more about this a bit, and back in '99. But now he's become a multi-billion-dollar company. And we're going to talk through some of the stories that he's gone with PE, which I think is private equity. For those who aren't familiar with that terminology, it's going to be a lot of fun, but also the way how in the heck do you scale an organization that has, limited technicians, right? They're hard to find these days, and to help make sure they're going to stay a part of your culture and growing that culture to make sure it is going in the right direction. So Matt, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Carl.
Absolutely. Okay, so you started in 1999, and here you are today. And we were joking before the podcast, overnight success, right? Yeah. But it's really been a real hockey stick for you. I mean, the reality, right? There's been this gradual growth, and now boom, past handful of years. Just for those who aren't familiar with Crash Champions, and maybe talking about that, like what I call the high level story. Share for the audience who isn't familiar with Crash Champions what that change happened from '99 to today.
Sure, glad to talk about it. I was just one shop all the way till 2014. I had a partner, and he wasn't ready to retire, so I had to wait till he was ready to let me buy him out, and then I started growing as quick as I could after that, and then I took on a private equity investment, as you talked about, in 2019. I was basically from 8 going to 11 locations at that time. And so we went from that in 2019 to 650 locations today. So it definitely, from a growth perspective, looks like a hockey stick. It went pretty quick once we started expanding nationwide.
Okay, so waking up today when you have over 600 locations to where you were not long ago with one location. How have you changed?
Probably tremendously. And that's been a necessity, because I view it for myself as I have to continue to grow bigger than the job, or else I'll be the bottleneck for the company. So I've definitely really accelerated learning the last several years. I was doing that work ahead of it too. There's that foundation that's getting built all those years. That's why the hockey stick happens, because of the foundation you're laying and work you're doing leading up to it. But in that rapid growth, there's been a whole lot of requirement for me to grow as well. And I look at it that way. Like if I'm ever holding the company up, then I'll be the first one to fire myself, because the investment's way more important. The company's way more important than the job is. So that growth is definitely top of mind for me.
When you started this journey of growth, did you ever envision you'd be this big?
No, it doesn't start that way. You start just trying to make a living, right? Or just trying to survive, just trying to make payroll. This getting this big was both, of course, the result of taking on investors, but also recognizing the trends in the industry. So it's an industry that's very much consolidating. It's probably, from a revenue perspective, 25% consolidated today. Location perspective, a lot less. But from what I know about industries that consolidate, or what I've learned, they'll consolidate up to about 65% or so. So I didn't want to be in the end of that game, right? You want to be in it at the right time. And just from a trend of the vehicle complexity, the amount of capital it takes to keep up with tooling and training to keep up with the cars, as well as from a efficiency standpoint, a cost saving standpoint, and a consistency of product for the insurance carriers who refer a lot of the work. That kind of trend of referring more and more to national companies was the reason why my team and I saw the need to expand and become a national company. It was a little bit of survival instinct more than it was a dream that I've always had. Now it's exciting, and I always wanted to grow, but I didn't dream of becoming a national company one day. It kind of the plan kind of happened. And COVID really accelerated those trends of everybody staying at home, insurance carriers dealing more and more with single point of contact at national companies. So even from a taking on PE perspective, that started to be a regional or maybe multi-regional play to recognizing where things were headed and then pivoting to, no, we need to hurry up and try to form a skeleton of a national company as quick as we can.
So, for those in the audience that haven't listened to the shows beforehand, one of the things I do in my career in 40 Strategy is I help out with turnarounds, and often it's because of the founders aren't able to change. They didn't realize. I wish I could say it exactly the way I asked it beforehand, but when you raise money, I'll ask this, Matt. When you raise money from PE, that's just you've already won, right?
Yeah, that wasn't why I was in that game. I really wanted to grow and ran out of ways to borrow money. So PE for me was a tool to grow the business. And both times I stayed heavily invested. I've been diluted, of course, as big as it's gotten, but mine wasn't to take my money and go home. It was a move to grow the company in my case.
Yeah, and that's where, where I was getting at there is that sometimes, right, or some people walk away and they take their money, right, but other people roll it in, or they'll roll partly part of their money in, they'll take some off the table. There's so many different options there, but what they miss is if there is now, usually private equity comes. The reality is it's some form of debt that has to be paid back, that's expected to be paid down. It's leverage typically for the company, and that has to be paid down. And if not, that executive, the reason why I get brought in is because that executive is not getting the job done.
Yeah,
and it's usually because they did not transform, or they reluctantly held on to team members who weren't helping them scale, right? I can only imagine your team has transformed. Maybe it hasn't. How much has your team transformed over the past, especially over the past 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah, great question. It's transformed tremendously. And as you said, in your experience, that almost has to happen. And for me, part of the growth, one advantage of being the founder is I was never worried about my job, or I'm not auditioning for my next job. So I was never afraid of bringing in people who have kind of been there, done that around me. So, I use the example of our chief operating officer. At the time we recruited him, we were going to be 39 shops at the time he was coming in, and he came from a company where he was running hundreds of shops. And so, there's an instance of where bringing in people around me who have the experience that I don't have has been a little bit a way of cheating my way to success and not having to learn from the school of hard knocks as much.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant thing. Is you had the humility, right, to recognize that you didn't know everything, and that you're willing to bring in people who had the experiences and did it beforehand. Uh, I'm sure you've seen other people that you've gone through, and they don't do that. What do you see when you observe that? What typically happens to them?
Well, I'll be honest. It's a weakness tendency of mine. You tend to, I like people, and I want to give people a chance. And I have made that mistake, and I think a lot of people would say, what's a mistake you've made as you grew the company, and it's hanging on to people too long, hoping that they can keep up or that they can make changes. So it is a weakness that I have to pay attention to. What helps me now is looking out for the good of that one person. We're 11,000 employees today. So that one person at an executive level in my company today hurts thousands of people because of whatever may not be working correctly. And so I have to remember that it's the effect on so many other people. And that's what, helps me to not worry about what I used to worry about, and to move faster than I used to. Leaving an executive in when the business has outran them and the executive has hit their ceiling is detrimental to the whole company and thousands of other people.
So one of the biggest challenges in roll-ups is the integration piece, right? You are, I'm assuming, buying in many cases sole owner, right, shops, or sometimes it's larger shops because you now have the scale to be able to take on larger ones.
Yeah.
How often are the existing managers, owners sticking around on average, with their existing store? Are they going all in with you, or is it kind of all over the board? What's been your experience there?
For the most part, the owners themselves have not stayed. The management and the rest of the team, we definitely we do everything that we can to retain. In fact, we look at acquisitions in kind of an alignment number of how do they line up to how we operate today? Are they insurance friendly, or do they take the other route? Is the owner in there running it every day? Because if he's stepping out, it's going to be a longer haul for us in kind of the integration of it. So we like it when the owner's not in there running the business every day and they've got a manager doing it, because retaining the manager, then the manager will operate much more similar to what we do than what the entrepreneur did. So we only one or two cases where the entrepreneur stayed on and took on a role within the company. And it's never been where they stayed just running that one shop that they were running in the times that it did. But usually, in an acquisition, the owners do get paid. And so they have some money and they tend to want to put that money to work and do what something comes along. Part of the process of sellers is wondering what they're going to do next, and that's the emotional part of it for them. But it's amazing; it doesn't take long for them to figure something out, and then their attention shifts to that pretty quickly. So we're pretty good at talking them through that. Now, we have had a lot of owners roll in equity, even though they're not going to be part of running the business. They see where we're headed and what we're doing. So they have wanted to leave some of their money in, and we've allowed them to do that. And that's been great for the culture shift in an acquisition, because when that has happened, what we're able to do is go in and announce to the team, and the owner or seller basically presents it to his team as, hey, I found an opportunity for you and me. We're going to be part of something much bigger. I'm not going to be operationally involved anymore, but I'm still an owner. The team doesn't know if he rolled $1 million, $10 million, or $1. Just the fact that he's continuing with ownership has been great for getting buy-in from their team as they're exiting. So that strategy's worked well for us for a few reasons.
When we talk with another side of, we work with companies when they're considering selling in the future, right? Or they're on the path of selling. And one of the most important things we say is you got to get yourself out of the business. You have to have a business that's running without you. I don't want to presume this, but I'm assuming it's true. I got to imagine you're willing to pay a higher multiple for a company that's already running and ready to go, where they're spending half their time in Florida or Arizona or something like that in the winters, versus an organization where that person's in all the time, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I talked about that realignment number that we look at. So if it's exactly that, a business that's running without the owner, if the facility's nice, if they have new equipment, all the things line up, it gets a 10, we're probably going to pay more for that. And the seller's going to expect that we would pay up. And then we'll do one that's a complete disaster and everything's wrong with it, but we see something in it that what we can turn it into, but we're going to pay far, far less.
Yeah. And that's that magic piece of the multiple that's not understood. If you get once again, an organization to be running, I want to be careful saying running its own, but running without you, right? And it has the controls and the systems in place that you could be away from it. Then you've developed things which actually creates greater value and gives most owners more peace, right? I mean, here you are, right? You're doing a podcast. You're not out there fixing cars anymore, right?
Yeah, we wouldn't want to see that. It would be really, really slow if I tried to do that today. And it would probably not be quality that I would be proud of. I'm a little out of practice.
So this next side behind in terms of, I mean, people, right? Internally within the company. Remind me again, how many employees are you up to now?
11,000.
Wow, 11,000 employees. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a lot, right? That's a lot of humans that rely upon this organization, right, to provide for their means, right? If that makes sense to get by.
Mhm.
And so, how do you bolt together all of these organizations that had different cultures and try to get it into one organization of crash champions, right? Where you're have the same culture and same thinking and the same thought process and same principles. Tell me how that works.
Sure, yeah, it's our biggest challenge, and the reason why it's such a big challenge is, um, number one, the speed. We've grown so fast, right? So, um, I describe the company as, typical company might be, say you've been running a certain segment of the business or a certain location for 3 years or more, you might would consider that mature. And so if you look back 3 years ago, we just had just a little over 100 locations. So for us, it's 70, 80, 90% of the company is brand new, and just a small portion of it is established. And so I'm looking forward to another year from now that dynamic will finally flip for a little bit, of where the majority of the company is established, and that brings you some tenure in your team and gets the culture much more aligned. The other reason why we're challenged is because a lot of us, including myself, we're just body shop guys. We know how to fix cars. We know how to take care of customers. It doesn't necessarily make us good managers of people, or good strategy, or good at communicating. And so all of those skills, even at a ground level of the company, for location managers on up, are all things that we've really had to work hard at teaching and bringing the team along, because uh, the way the industry has come up, the talent, from a managerial perspective, has to be a little bit homegrown. And the other reason why it's been a challenge for us too is, twice now we've bought companies that are bigger than us. So when you get those little culture wars of who knows more, or whose show is it's a little bit of, my CHRO told me, Matt, the last time we did it, the company was 335 locations and we were 200. And from a when does the culture get there, my CHRO told me it was going to be 3 years. And I was like, oh my goodness, how do we fast track that? Like, how do we do it quicker? And unfortunately, we're 2 years in, and I do believe we've made tons of progress, but he was probably right on that. It takes 3 years.
Yeah.
But from a culture, like, we changed the name right away. We do, we have a training that we set up for the company. A typical general manager above, for example, we send through 3 weeks worth of training when they're onboarded. And one of those weeks of training, we take them up to Montana, and that week is all about the culture of the company. We teach them the company, why we do what we do. And so we talk about the culture a lot, and we grow the people a lot, is my best advice for what's worked for us. But it's a real challenge, because you're constantly bringing another different culture into the company as you're rolling up others.
So when I loved it how you talk about buying the bigger company where they naturally feel like they were the dominant, right, by
Yeah.
definition. And it's like, it's not true though, the in this case, right, Matt, you are the CEO. Crash Championship culture is gonna ultimately take over, right? But there's gonna be this battle and fight naturally behind that. So how give it like a practical example of like, how do you help reinforce those behaviors when somebody's violating the key principles that make sense for crash champions?
Yeah. Well, you take corrective action, and really, I I think of it as, it's our job to sell them on us. Like, and so we're
Mm,
constantly doing that. There's things about us that we feel make us unique, and they're things that people can easily rally around. So for example, we talked about being founder led. And we talk about, my history in the industry of, I wrecked my car when I was 16, and that's how I started learning how to fix cars. And so literally, when we talk about being founder led, it's a space we can own because no other company this large in our industry can say that. And what it really means isn't anything about me being special. It's about the fact that I've sat in every seat from an employee perspective. I've done that job. And so I'm not going to come with some crazy idea on how to make their job harder or some idea that's not going to work because I came from a different industry and I'm trying to put something in play here that I didn't really think through very well. So there's an example of something that they can get behind. We talk about the difference is trust, and that's really our company why, because what is, from an elevator pitch about the company, the elevator pitch is something like, look, of course we fix cars, but it's beyond just fixing cars. We're really helping people in a time of need. And when the reality is even though you don't, we wouldn't wish it on you, you or someone you care about is probably going to have an accident one day, and you're going to want to know somebody that you can trust to help you with that situation and repair your car well. And so when we talk to people about that difference is trust, every interaction that we have with each other, with a vendor, with an insurance partner, or with a customer is a chance to either build on that trust or tear it down. And so simple, easy to understand concepts like that that resonate, that who would want to argue with that and say that that's a bad way to think about things. So it's pretty easy to get buy-in from what we stand for and why we do what we do. And there's excitement in growth. And so that gets a little bit almost, you could even say, addictive, because what growth does for everyone is there's excitement around watching it happen. There's excitement for everybody who sees a career path for themselves. They don't have to wait for somebody to retire or quit or die. We're going to grow, and that next position up is going to become available for them in the near future. So there's a spirit of excitement around the growth that's advantageous as well. I think those are things, and there's many more, but those are, some high level, simple things that really help us with the culture. I will admit though, like it's a constant effort. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's I appreciate you saying that last part, right? Is you do have to be consistent. I love that concept of the trust, right? That, because that's just one of those principles of people know whether they're building trust with whether or not, right? You don't need to have a 700-page document to validate what trust means or what trust is. You feel it, right? Whether you've actually increased the relationship of the person with, or whether you've undermined it.
Exactly right.
And what's interesting, I got to imagine though, is that there probably is some training with some of the organizations, because I'll just maybe throw an example out of, like, they were like, oh, well, we can make for lack of a better term, an extra buck to take advantage of this particular situation because it's just the way we've been doing business. But perhaps for you all, it's like, no, that's against our standard. That's against how we do things. I understand you've done in the past, but that's not what's going to make us long-term success. And so something that they thought was right in the past is now no longer true, right? I've got to imagine you've run into those type of situations.
Oh yeah. Like people like to find shortcuts, like in life, right? So you're constantly, and what we've done as we've grown is you build tools to be able to catch that stuff. And you, and that's really, I don't know how else to figure it out. You deal with a situation and then you create a process or a process adjustment that gets put in place so that it doesn't happen again. But you will get a bad actor every now and then. And then what you got to do is correct the situation and make it right. But I'm not talking about anything super egregious here. I'm just talking about people who find a way to shortcut stuff. And consistency is hard. I'll give you an example of, one thing that's really important, because it's what we do, is that we fix cars well. And so coming down to quality checking a vehicle before you deliver it, I think about things like what would be the worst thing that could happen is for us to fix a car wrong and somebody to get hurt as a result of something we did. And so how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? And so that comes to then quality checking things, which of course we do always. But as we've gotten bigger, it's go visit what it looks like at each location. And I would say in that, when we first set about investigating that, we didn't have a care about quality problem, but we definitely had an inconsistency on how we went about it. Some managers would say, I test drive everything. Other managers would say, well, there's jobs that I know I've been doing this for 30 years and I don't need to test drive that one. It was just a door handle, or something like that. So there's examples of where people aren't trying to do wrong. They're very experienced at what they do, but as a big company, we have to create consistencies and documentation around that consistency to make sure that something doesn't go wrong. And if it does, at least we can sleep at night knowing we did everything that we could to do our best to make sure that something didn't go wrong. But that's the consistency issue that you have to continue to refine as you grow.
One of the big challenges in so many different industries right now is talent, right? Now in this case, I'm not talking about the managerial talent. I'm talking about people actually, in your case, technicians working on the cars. What are you doing anything differently to attract, retain, develop technicians so it could become a strength of yours rather than a weakness?
Yeah, we've established an internal apprentice program with a goal to ramping that pretty significantly. In the industry, there's a shortage of 30,000 technicians today, and because of the average age of the technician in the industry, the average age is in the high 40s, and so a lot of the industry is baby boomers that are close to retirement age. And so there's predicted to be a need for another 100,000 in the next 10 years on top of the 30,000 that we're short today. And to put that in perspective, there's about 180,000, depending on your source, it's probably about 180,000 collision repair technicians in the US. So it's a whole lot of need over the next several years. And so we have to train that and grow that internally. So we put a big initiative around an apprentice program that we started a couple years back. And we would have started it sooner, but I was much smaller. I couldn't really make that big of we were always training people, but it wasn't a program that you could brag about because we were such a small company. So now as a big company, it has to be a defined program with a whole lot more structure to it. And honestly, if you look at a vehicle today, vehicles have changed so much in the last 5 years. The amount of technology that's being pumped into them is almost scary. I keep asking, who's asking for all this stuff on vehicles anyway? Because I know in my car I don't use half of it, but it's scary for keeping up with it because for decades, the cars really didn't change that much. I mean, airbags came out, right? But since unibody cars, really, from a collision repair standpoint, not much had changed until ADAS, advanced driver assist stuff started to happen. So now the vehicles are almost like computers on wheels. There's 3,000 chips and maybe up to 100 computers and everything else, along with multiple cameras, radars, sensors, and everything around the perimeter of the car. So it's much, much more complicated. So that training and learning curve is something that is just all over it all day, every day, because we have to be.
I love the concept that they have the apprentice, the training. I'm glad you are heading down that path, right? And I obviously had the idea beforehand, but you could legitimately do it. Literally, one of the earlier podcast recordings we had today was somebody else who's in the trade industry, construction industry, and he it's like, hey, this is actually something you could have success at and have a job, right? Because there's demand for what you have, and you could actually make good pay if you have the right compensation systems in place, right, behind it. And that's things that typically aren't people thinking about, if they're stuck not doing something. But there's so much opportunity for quality paying jobs, right, that are out there, but they're just not trained, right? They're just not skilled. They have degrees that don't make sense, or they've gone down a path in a certain direction, but there's so much more opportunity for them. So I applaud you for heading down that path. All right, we're getting close to our end, but there's always a few questions. Oh, Matt, you look like you want to jump in and say something there.
Yeah, that was music to my ears what you were saying, because it's a huge opportunity in the industry, and most blue collar industries today, because like we haven't done a great job as an industry of being attractive as what young people want to enter. But our average technicians make over $100,000 a year, and we can train you without having to go to 4 years of college and going into debt. So I'm on a mission. We're on a mission as a company to spread the word on what a great opportunity it is that just isn't known about, and I think that exists in a lot of trades today.
Yeah, so we don't have time for the tangent, and it's something we talked about in the previous podcast, but the concept of what may be happening with the new legislation of where a college is responsible for the debts of a college. And if that actually goes through and passes, a lot of these liberal arts degrees are not going to be funded anymore. College is going to get cut in half. And what's ultimately going to bring in is the opportunities for these apprenticeship opportunities and good paying jobs, 6-figure jobs, which you just said there. I mean, probably I didn't expect you to say $100,000, for the annual salary. That's that's a healthy, right, compensation system where you can help provide for your family on doing something like that at a minimum for yourself, through that, again, that career. And I love the direction that we need to head towards, right, as a society. It's in our best interest, but I love how companies like you are being innovative internally to get it done. Okay. Few key
You're almost forced to. There's no other way to get it done. So that's, again, just forced from necessity.
Well, necessity, right, is the mother of all inventions, and that's what you're basically forced to do right now. So, just a few my consistent. I like to ask a few questions commonly. How do you measure success in your business today?
In my business today, it's growth, right? Like you always have top line and bottom line that you're worried about. We also have, we measure everything. We have data for days. And so we measure success in components of our customers happy, our insurance partners happy, which there's KPIs that they want us to achieve. We measure financial success at the locations. We measure the retention of our employees. We measure employee engagement. So you name it, we're concentrating on it and measuring it. What almost becomes an issue is there's so much that you're concentrating on. You have to really articulate like the couple big levers that you want everybody to pay attention to, because you're talking about so many other things too all the time. It's, for us, the challenge is refocusing everybody because we're giving them so much to be concerned about.
Yeah, I like calling it bringing the K back in the KPI, right? There's no data shortage, but there is a lack of focus on the most important levers. And when you could get that Pareto principle on, hey, these handful, right, of KPIs are really the difference, and the rest ones are just performance indicators. They're just telling us how it's tracking. That's a beautiful set of understanding that. So that's good. I'm glad. Clearly, you have a lot of measurements and growth, and of course, EBITDA and all the different things you're trying to do to help grow. I loved how you mentioned the first thing you said is, hey, customer satisfaction, right? Because if you don't have good customer satisfaction, if you don't have your insurance, right? Because you really have two customers, so to speak, right?
B2B and B2C, both. Yep.
That's right. Right. And in a very stressful situation, as we talked about before we started recording, right? Somebody car crash, right? That's a very stressful situation for them for so many reasons. So next piece here is, I'm curious for yourself. You mentioned, you've had to change a lot, to get taking, back to where you had a few stores to where you have today and 11,000 employees that you have responsibility for. So what habits do you do now on a consistent basis, which is helping you have your best performance?
So habits for best performance would be constantly reading and learning, or seeking mentorship through coaches or whatever it may be. Those are keys for me to continue to advance. on a work-life balance, and that I gotta be honest, like those have been a lot neglected by me, and that's credit to my wife for putting up with it, and all credit to her for taking care of things on the home front so that I can do what I do. I wouldn't be able to do it if she weren't as much of a force as she is at home. So, but I haven't done well at the work-life balance. I'm working on it now because I think I'm over 50 now and concerned about longevity. And when I hear a podcast about how much sleep I'm supposed to get, and I look back at decades of getting 4 to 5 hours a night versus a minimum of what you're supposed to get of 7, I'm starting to pay attention to those things now. Um, uh, and so in those regards, from where I was to where I know that I need to be, how I measure it today is progress. It's fighting for the time. Like, I know I need to work out every day. I know I learned a little bit about meditation, for example. And the worst thing is I learned it's going to take more minutes out of my day if I want to do it. And I don't have the minutes. So I don't know. It's part of me wonders why I bothered to learn it. Right. So there's, what I can say is I'm a definite work in progress on a personal, like, how do I keep everything balanced? How do I do the things I need to do? I'm kind of measuring progress toward making sure I fit important things in so that I can live long enough to enjoy my kids and the future and some of the things worked really hard for.
Because you just literally lent into it. I really appreciate it as despite all the growth and the way you talked about, there's this honest entrepreneurs, especially if they have a family, they have a significant other. It's stressful, right? Going through the changes they've gone through, and it's not always easy at home, right? When you're traveling around the country, I'm sure doing some of these things, transactions, you're dealing with stressful, the amount of PE actions and acquisitions of companies, and dealing with owners who are frustrated of their sale and what's taking place, and that there are people being taken care of, and then you just have everything else that goes through it. But it's like, and once again, at the end of the day, as they say, it's how we measure success in our personal life, because it's yes, it's about money, but it's not really about money after a certain point, right?
Right.
You can read, you never have to work a day again, but you're still doing it because it matters to you, right? There's still things that matter behind the process. And so, anyways, I appreciate you bleeding in, because that was going to be my second question, which is how do you measure success in your personal life? And you're saying, hey, it's developing it, working it. And that's an honest answer. I mean, it really is. So I appreciate going by that. So you mentioned books.
Yeah, I'll come back when I have it figured out and give you like the secret formula to success. But I have to be honest and tell you where I'm really at.
No, I appreciate it, because I don't always get that. A lot of times we're like, oh, I got this, but the reality is we all have our challenges. If we're honest, right? Every single successful person, and whatever you want to define success, we have these challenges. So that's I appreciate your
maybe I have one. Maybe if I have for 1 second, like, I do have one success that I'm getting way better at, and that is being present. Like, so I do make significant effort now, leave the phone alone at home, leave the computer alone, and get out of my own head and just be with the family when I'm there. So the quantity of time is going to continue to struggle for a bit, but I've definitely focused on the quality of the time getting better. I owe them that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Okay, you mentioned you read a lot. What's a book or two that was a critical thing, or you maybe are regularly referring other people to read? You're just like, hey, this is something that has impacted me positively and helped you out in your journey and growing.
Oh boy, sure. So there's some that everybody's heard of, right? Like Think and Grow Rich, and that one for me helped me to understand just how much everything starts with your own the way you think, with what's in between your ears, right? And so it's super important because it's a mindset, and that matters the most. Couple other ones that have been helpful. there's a couple books, one called Relentless and one Winning by Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan's trainer. I really enjoyed that because it really talks about a champion's mindset and how it's different, than most others. And I could really relate to some of the things that he talked about and help drive me in reading those. And then maybe one that I'm looking at now because of the ability to articulate the vision as it's gotten bigger. Vision Driven Leader is a book that was great for me at this point in time because I've learned as it gets bigger and the audience gets bigger, I have to get way more detailed with the vision. I can't just broad stroke it anymore because that leaves it to their imagination to really understand where we're going and what we're trying to do. And so that's been a growth focus for me to be able to articulate the details of the vision that are important even more, speaking in much more 4K rather than black and white. And so that book helped me a lot with that.
Yeah, and one of the other books, if you haven't read, Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold, he was part of 1-800-GET-JUNK, right? And he does a great job. They did a great job of that, of understanding it's deeper, right? It's not just a vision statement, right? It's what does the future look like, and so when you can get something where from the top to the bottom can understand what the future looks like 3 years from now, it's like Think and Grow Rich at the same time, right? It's actually just putting it into words deeper than we typically would have done in the past. So that's brilliant. Matt, we've got just a couple minutes here, or just 1 minute. How can people connect and learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. At Matt Ebert CC is the handle pretty much on every social media channel. So look for me there, or for the company is crashchampions.com.
Perfect. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Measure Success podcast today.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. And everyone else is listening, I hope you've enjoyed listening to Matt's story, what he has done with Crash Champions. It's been absolutely, it's a tremendous story. You don't hear these every day. And Matt, I really mean it. Congratulations for what you have done, and keep up the efforts, and keep on working on yourself as you've been talking about it. I love that. I love how you're candid, but you've done a remarkable story. So I appreciate that. And everyone else is listening, I hope this has inspired you. This is somebody who started with one store and now has $1 billion, as a part of $1 billion company. And he's been able to lead it from beginning to end, which is a big current state, which is not common. So it's a really uncommon part around that. So Matt, thank you once again. Thank you for listening. Wishing you, as we always like to say to listeners, wishing you the very best at measuring your success. Have a great day.